Ted Bundy, the man with a chilling smile, was not just an ordinary man, but a monster hidden beneath the facade of charm and intelligence. Born in Vermont in 1946, Bundy was raised by a young, unmarried mother. To avoid the social stigma of an illegitimate birth, Bundy was led to believe that his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. Growing up, Bundy was described as shy but bright. He performed well academically, showing a keen interest in politics and law. His early life seemed unremarkable, with no signs of the horrors that were to come. But beneath this veneer of normality, there were early signs of a darker side. He was fascinated with the macabre, with a particular interest in detective magazines and crime novels that detailed violent deaths. As Bundy progressed into adolescence and adulthood, his veneer of charm and intelligence became more polished. He was known to be articulate, personable, and attractive to women. He led a seemingly normal life, graduating from the University of Washington with a degree in psychology, and even had a long-standing relationship. But this was all part of the facade, a mask he wore to blend in with society. In the late 60s, the mask began to slip, revealing glimpses of the monster beneath. Around this time, Bundy began to exhibit strange behaviors. He would often disappear for days at a time, and he developed an obsession with knives. These were the early signs of a man who would become one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. Behind the facade of a charming, articulate man lurked a sadistic killer unbeknownst to those around him. This was Ted Bundy, a paradox of a man, a walking contradiction. A man who could charm you with his intellect and charisma, then turn around and commit unspeakable acts of violence. A man who was, in many ways, the embodiment of evil hidden in plain sight. As Bundy grew older, his darker side began to take over, initiating a reign of terror that would shock the nation. The charming young man who once stood as a beacon of potential had become an embodiment of evil, his actions casting a long and terrifying shadow across the country. Ted's first known victims were unsuspecting and innocent. Joni Lentz and Linda Ann Healy, two college students in the early 70s, marked the beginning of Bundy's horrifying spree. It was in these early stages that his modus operandi began to take shape. He would often feign injury, using a cast or crutches to appear harmless and lure his victims to his car. Once they were within his grasp, he would strike, overpowering them with sheer force and a chilling lack of remorse. As time passed, Bundy's crimes escalated, not only in frequency but also in violence. He moved from one state to another, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. His actions were not just about the act of killing, they were a twisted form of control, an assertion of power that stemmed from a deeply rooted darkness within him. The progression of his crimes was chillingly systematic. He would abduct, assault, and finally end the lives of his victims, discarding them as if they were nothing more than objects. This pattern, this cycle of violence, was a clear indication of the monster that Bundy had become. He was no longer just a man. He was a predator hunting in the shadows, leaving devastation in his path. Yet despite the escalating nature of his crimes, his charismatic facade enabled him to blend into society, all the while carrying out his gruesome acts in secret. It was this duality, this ability to hide his true nature, that made Bundy such a terrifying figure. The trail of terror left by Bundy was only beginning, and the nation was yet to realize the horror that had befallen them. As we delve deeper into the life of Ted Bundy, we are confronted with the harsh reality of the evil that can lurk beneath a seemingly ordinary facade. Despite his monstrous deeds, Bundy managed to evade capture for years, leading the authorities on a deadly game of cat and mouse. This wasn't a mere coincidence or luck. It was a testament to Bundy's cunning and manipulative nature, a chilling reminder that monsters often wear the most human of faces. In the shadows of society, Bundy operated with an uncanny ability to blend in. He was a chameleon, always able to adapt to his surroundings, to seem just ordinary enough to escape suspicion. His charm and good looks were his greatest weapons, lulling unsuspecting victims into a false sense of security, while simultaneously throwing law enforcement off his trail. But this game of deception wasn't just limited to his victims or the police. Bundy was a master manipulator, even managing to convince those closest to him of his innocence. He was an enigma, a puzzle that left even the most seasoned detectives scratching their heads, wondering how such a seemingly normal man could harbor such darkness within. Then came the turning point. In the summer of '77, Bundy's game of cat and mouse finally came to an end. He was apprehended in Florida under the suspicion of a series of brutal murders. The evidence was overwhelming, and his charming facade began to crumble. The trial that followed was nothing short of a media circus. Bundy, ever the showman, took full advantage of the spotlight, often representing himself in court. He dissected the evidence, cross-examined witnesses, and delivered passionate monologues, all with a chilling calmness that sent shivers down the spines of those watching. His performance was mesmerizing, but the jury was not swayed. Bundy was found guilty and sentenced to death, an outcome that seemed to shock him as much as it did the world. But even behind bars, Bundy was far from finished. His story, his reign of terror, was far from over. Even in his final hours, Bundy continued to captivate and horrify the world, proving that the game of cat and mouse was never really about evasion, but manipulation. In a shocking twist of events, Bundy managed to escape from custody not once, but twice, only to continue his reign of terror. Ted Bundy was not just a chillingly ruthless killer, he was also a cunning and manipulative escape artist. His first escape was a daring feat of audacity. While preparing for his own defense in the Aspen, Colorado courthouse library, he jumped from a second-story window and disappeared into the wilderness. For 6 days he evaded capture, surviving in the mountains before he was finally apprehended. Yet Bundy's audacity didn't end there. His second escape was even more brazen. He sawed a hole in his cell's ceiling and crawled through it, slipping away into the night. By the time his absence was discovered, Bundy was already in Florida, poised to commit his most horrific crimes yet. In Florida, his brutality escalated. He broke into a sorority house at the Florida State University, attacking 4 women within a span of 15 minutes. 2 of them tragically did not survive. A few weeks later, he kidnapped and murdered a 12-year-old girl, his youngest known victim. But Bundy's freedom was short-lived. He was recaptured a week after his final murder. This time, there would be no escape. The legal proceedings that followed were nothing short of a spectacle. Bundy, ever the narcissist, insisted on representing himself. With the nation watching, he cross-examined witnesses and gave closing arguments, turning the courtroom into his own macabre stage. Despite his theatrics, the evidence was overwhelming. Bundy was convicted and sentenced to death. On January 24, 1989, he was executed in the electric chair, finally closing the gruesome chapter of his life. Bundy's reign of terror finally came to an end, but the impact of his crimes would forever haunt the nation. His chilling legacy, marked by his charisma and his cruelty, serves as a harrowing reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of ordinary men. Ted Bundy, the charming, intelligent monster, left behind a legacy of fear and fascination that continues to captivate the world. Bundy's life was a twisted tale of charisma and cruelty. Born to a complicated family dynamic, he grew up with a potent mix of intelligence, charm, and a dark undercurrent of violence. His life took a sinister turn as he descended into a life of crime, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. His modus operandi was simple yet terrifying: lure, overpower, and eliminate. His victims, all young women, were snuffed out in their prime, their lives cut short by a man who wore the mask of normalcy with chilling perfection. The aftermath of Bundy's actions rippled across the nation, causing an upheaval in the way society perceived safety and trust. His trial was a spectacle, one that gripped the nation with its horror and disbelief. Bundy's ability to represent himself in court, his escape from custody, and his eventual execution all added to the grim allure of his story. But it's not just the gruesome details of his crimes that keep Bundy's legacy alive. His influence on pop culture and the true crime genre is undeniable. Bundy's story has been retold in countless books, movies, and television series, each iteration attempting to dissect the mind of this enigma. His influence has even extended to the field of forensic psychology,
where his case is studied in an attempt to understand the motivations and behaviors of serial killers. Yet it's crucial to remember that at the heart of Bundy's legacy are the lives he cruelly extinguished. The stories of his victims, their dreams and their families' grief, should never be overshadowed by the grisly fascination surrounding Bundy himself. Ted Bundy, a name synonymous with evil, remains one of the most notorious serial killers in history, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the most charming of facades.